If you know me, which I bet you do, is someone who grew up with a show that many of us fondly remember, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse was a preschool animated TV series that aired on Disney Channel in the mid to late 2000s, created to introduce a new generation to Mickey Mouse and his classic friends, Minnie, Donald, Daisy, Goofy, and Pluto. Each episode followed a simple, interactive problem-solving adventure where Mickey would invite viewers to help him choose the right mouse tools to solve challenges along the way. With its bright 3D animation, catchy songs, and repeated phrases like, "Oh, toodles," and "hot dog," the show encouraged early learning skills such as counting, shapes, logic, and participation. More than just a kids' show, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse became a shared childhood memory for many, something you watched after school, sang along to without even realizing you were learning, and associated with comfort, routine, and simpler times. For a lot of us, it was our introduction to interactive television and a reminder of how timeless Mickey Mouse truly is. In July of 2025, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse made a major comeback with an official reboot titled Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. The announcement alone sparked a lot of attention, especially from older fans who grew up with the original series in the 2000s and suddenly saw a piece of their childhood return in a modern era. The reboot was positioned as part of Disney's broader effort to refresh its most recognizable preschool brands for a new generation, while still keeping them familiar enough for parents who remembered watching the original with younger siblings, or even themselves. The plus in the title clearly reflected Disney's current branding era and also signaled that this wasn't just a rerun, but a refreshed continuation of the Clubhouse name. Online, the reaction was a mix of nostalgia, curiosity, and cautious optimism. Many fans shared memories of growing up with the show, its catchphrases, and its role as a comfort series during early childhood. Others discussed how surreal it felt to see something so tied to their past return nearly 2 decades later. Whether people planned to watch it or not, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus became a reminder of how long-lasting the cultural impact of the original show was, and how certain childhood staples never fully disappear, they just wait for the right moment to come back. As a YouTuber, you're always thinking of ways to grab an audience's attention, testing ideas, experimenting with formats, and seeing what clicks. One time, starting a series from a dedicated playlist really worked. It gave viewers a clear entry point, built momentum, and made people come back for the next upload because they knew it was part of something ongoing. For a while, it felt like you'd cracked the code, but over time, interest slowly faded. Views dipped, engagement softened, and the series that once carried energy began to feel quieter. It wasn't a failure, just a reminder of how fast trends move and how even successful ideas can have a season before it's time to evolve again. The spin-off Minnie Mouse Clubhouse series on my channel was a great example of that idea working at its best. It built off something people already recognized, gave it a fresh focus, and immediately caught attention because it felt familiar but new. Viewers knew what they were getting, followed the playlist from start to finish, and for a while it created real excitement and consistency on the channel, showing how a well-placed spin-off can briefly reignite interest and bring an audience together before naturally running its course. Minnie Mouse Clubhouse was a created, unaired spin-off to the already popular Mickey Mouse Clubhouse series. It was envisioned as its own show beginning in 2007, but the project was ultimately scrapped and never made it to air, leaving it as a forgotten concept tied to the original series. Years later, in 2022, revisiting and talking about the stories imagined for that lost series, such as Daisy's 16th birthday, All Grown Up, Winter Formal, and the rest of the ideas across its 8 episodes, unexpectedly grabbed people's attention. The concept of an unseen spin-off mixed with nostalgia kept viewers engaged and curious, and for a time, the series discussions held strong interest. However, like many nostalgia-driven projects, that attention gradually slowed, with viewership fading about 2 years later as the moment passed. There was a reason I brought up the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse reboot earlier. And it's because it became one of the craziest ways a Mandela effect could resurface in a completely new light, making people question what they remember, what they thought existed, and how something once believed to be lost or imagined suddenly feels almost real again. There was one episode of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus where Minnie got her very own clubhouse, a moment that immediately stood out and sparked conversations because of how familiar, yet surreal, it felt to longtime fans. The episode itself feels like a milestone moment rather than just a regular installment. It's framed in a way that makes it clear something special is happening, with extra emphasis on build-up, celebration, and significance instead of rushing straight into the premise. The pacing is more deliberate, giving the moment weight, and it's presented as something meaningful rather than a quick gimmick. What really stands out, without giving anything away, is how the episode leans into a sense of recognition and payoff. It feels intentional, almost like a quiet nod to longtime viewers, while still being completely accessible to new audiences. By the end, it leaves an impression that lingers, not because of shock or twists, but because of what the moment represents. The episode almost acted like a Mandela effect in motion, especially because videos about the unaired Minnie Mouse Clubhouse spin-off had already been circulating back in 2022. For people who remembered those discussions and imagined episodes, seeing something so similar suddenly exist in an official capacity felt unreal, like a memory crossing over into reality. It's hard not to wonder whether Disney executives took inspiration from that resurfaced interest, whether consciously or indirectly, or if it came from accumulated fan requests and shared ideas that had been floating around for years. Either way, it gave the impression that something once believed to be scrapped or imagined had quietly influenced the present. The Mandela effect angle goes even deeper when you look at why those 8 stories were uploaded in the first place. About 3 years before the reboot was even in production, the idea wasn't to predict anything or revive a trend. It came from a lingering sense that something had existed, or at least should have. The concept of Minnie Mouse Clubhouse felt oddly familiar, like a show that belonged in the same space as Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, even though it never officially aired. That gap between memory, expectation, and reality became the spark. Uploading those 8 stories was a way of giving shape to that feeling. Each one explored what the series might have been, pulling from shared childhood logic, nostalgia, and the natural evolution people assumed the franchise would have taken. Once they were out there, something interesting happened. Viewers reacted, not as if they were seeing pure fiction, but as if they were reconnecting with something half-remembered. Comments, reactions, and discussions often carried the same tone: "I swear this was real," or "I remember something like this." That's where the Mandela effect truly set in. Over time, the imagined version of the spin-off began to feel anchored in collective memory, reinforced by repeated exposure and shared discussion. So when the reboot eventually appeared years later and introduced an episode that visually and conceptually echoed those old ideas, it felt less like coincidence and more like a loop closing. The line between what was created by fans, what was remembered, and what became official suddenly blurred, turning a scrapped concept, a set of uploaded stories, and a reboot episode into one continuous, uncanny thread. Back when those 8 videos were uploaded to YouTube, they were tapping into a very specific and powerful combination of nostalgia and imagination. The intended and actual demographic wasn't just preschoolers or kids like the original Mickey Mouse Clubhouse audience. It was people who grew up with the franchise and had since become teens or adults. This group is unique. They remember the original show well enough to feel emotionally connected to it, but they also have the perspective and curiosity to engage with fan-made or conceptual stories. Because the videos reimagined what an unaired spin-off might look like, they struck a chord with people who remembered Mickey Mouse Clubhouse from their childhood and wondered, what if? Were intrigued by the idea of deeper, character-focused stories than what preschool formats typically offered, enjoyed the creative practice of reinterpreting childhood memories into something grown-up or expanded, shared the videos with others who felt the same pull between memory and reinvention. That's why the demographic was broader and more varied than a typical kids' playlist. It included young adults, nostalgic teens, longtime Disney fans, and creators curious about alternate versions of childhood shows. Discussions around these uploads often weren't about which episode was your favorite, in the simple sense. They were about why these imagined stories felt familiar, why they resonated emotionally, and what they said about our collective memory of the original series. Some viewers even reacted as though the ideas must have come from a version that almost existed, which loops right back into that Mandela effect sensation. What really set this group of 8 apart was that they weren't just entertaining. They invited people to reflect on how media from early childhood stays with us, how it evolves in our minds over time, and how imagined continuations can feel almost as real as things that actually aired. That's why the videos initially caught attention and cultivated a niche, passionate audience long before any reboot was announced. The unofficial Minnie Mouse Clubhouse series you uploaded on YouTube, the one with 8 imagined stories like Daisy's 16th birthday, All Grown Up, and Winter Formal, was targeted at a much older and very different audience than the official Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus content. Those fan-created videos intentionally explored themes and tones that weren't typical for preschool content, including emotional backstories, adult-leaning humor, and more intense elements like implied violence or dramatic stakes, which resonated with teens and adults who grew up with the original show and wanted something deeper and more reflective of life beyond the preschool years. In contrast, the Minnie Mouse Clubhouse episode from the official Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus series is firmly rooted in the preschool demographic that Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus is designed for. According to Wikipedia, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse Plus is an American animated interactive children's television series for preschoolers featuring familiar characters solving simple problems through songs and playful sequences. Its content is educational, lighthearted, and age-appropriate, aimed at very young children and early learners. Wikipedia. While your 8-story YouTube series drew an older crowd because of its narrative depth, implied mature themes, and creative reinterpretation of beloved characters, the Minnie Mouse Clubhouse episode in Clubhouse Plus sticks to friendly, cheerful storytelling intended to entertain and engage preschool audiences without the complexity or adult nuances present in your imagined series. Before even asking the big question, the clues matter. When you line up the comparisons, a pattern starts to form. On one side, there was a fan-created series uploaded years earlier, built around an unaired concept that felt real to a lot of people. It circulated long enough to settle into collective memory, was discussed seriously, and was framed with the kind of confidence that made viewers feel like they were rediscovering something lost rather than watching pure invention. On the other side, years later, an official reboot arrives and introduces an episode that visually and conceptually overlaps with what many people had already internalized as a missing or forgotten idea. The reason this could even turn into something that feels real comes down to timing, familiarity, and shared memory. The original show was deeply embedded in childhood routines, which makes any related concept easier to accept without questioning. The fan series arrived at a moment when nostalgia was strong, and because it filled a gap that seemed logical, of course Minnie would have had her own clubhouse, the brain didn't resist it. Over time, repetition, discussion, and emotional attachment did the rest. By the time an official version appeared, it didn't feel new. It felt confirmatory. So the big question becomes, is this really a Mandela effect? The answer isn't simple. It's not a textbook case where people remember an event that never happened out of nowhere. Instead, it sits in a gray area where fan creation, nostalgia, and official media blurred together. What makes it feel like a Mandela effect is that many people didn't just imagine the idea individually. They shared the same false certainty, reinforced by years of exposure and discussion. Whether it's a true Mandela effect or a powerful example of collective suggestion and memory blending, the result is the same. Something once fictional ended up feeling remembered. And when reality finally echoed it, the line between memory and creation disappeared. The way the audience might figure out whether this is truly a Mandela effect is by examining their own memories and comparing them with others, not just the content itself. That means asking when they first remember the idea of Minnie having her own clubhouse, where that memory came from, and whether it existed before seeing fan discussions, videos, or reinterpretations. If multiple people independently recall the same details that were never officially released, and can't trace those memories back to a single source, that's where the Mandela effect possibility strengthens. Another key step is timeline checking. Looking at upload dates, discussion threads, comments, and reactions helps reveal whether the belief formed organically over time or was gradually shaped through repeated exposure. When an idea appears years before it becomes official and people later insist they remember it always being a thing, that gap is where false memory can take root. Finally, the audience can pay attention to emotional certainty. Mandela effects aren't just about remembering something wrong, they're about confidence in that memory. If people feel absolutely sure something existed, even after seeing proof it didn't, that conviction itself becomes part of the evidence. Whether the conclusion is a true Mandela effect or a powerful case of collective memory blending, the discovery comes from questioning not just what was released, but how memory, nostalgia, and repetition quietly rewrote the past. What everyone can learn from this is how powerful memory, nostalgia, and repetition really are. Audiences can see how easily a shared idea can turn into a shared belief when it feels emotionally true, even if it was never official. Executives can learn that fan conversations, reinterpretations, and long-running nostalgia aren't just noise. They can quietly shape perception and even point toward ideas people are already primed to accept as real. And as a YouTube creator, it shows how storytelling doesn't just entertain. It can influence collective memory, spark long-term engagement, and blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that last far beyond the original upload. Thank you all for watching, and if you really want to see the comparisons for yourself, you can check out the 2 links in the description below, one for the unaired series and one for the official episode.